Good afternoon, everyone who's based in the UK and Europe, and good morning to everyone that has joined overseas. It's a bit early, I think, in the States. Is it early for you guys?
It's about 8 a.m.
Oh, okay, yeah, so that's good. I don't know if I would be as bright as you two at 8 a.m. UK time, but you're looking good. It feels like only last week I last had a session with you, Rick. We ran a webinar, so it's great to be with you on today's LinkedIn Live. What we're going to discuss today is a mid-year recap, the current state of global payroll. So I think there's a lot's happened this year, so I'm really interested in this conversation. So before we start, we have somebody new with us today, and this is Salinas. Salinas, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yes. Thank you, Melanie, for letting me be a part of the conversation today. I'm Salinas Rivera. I'm representing Helios as their senior local payroll partner integrations manager. My educational background is actually in computer science. I focused on artificial intelligence and inner networks back when it wasn't really cool. And I found my way in the HR, payroll, and benefits consulting space on the technical side, and just loved it. Never left. So prior to joining Helios, I spent about 15 years in a few different roles supporting UKG and Workday implementations and integrations. So happy to be here with everyone today.
And Rick, for those of the people who have joined today that don't know you, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so Rick Hamill, founder and CEO of Helios. I am a serial entrepreneur, but even prior to that, I was head of global HR, talent acquisition, and payroll operations for a government contractor with $1 billion contract in Saudi Arabia, Singapore, and Japan. So I have been in this global world when payroll was just Excel files and emails. And to see where we've come from there to where we are today, it's been an amazing journey, and always a pleasure to continue to have these conversations with you, Melanie, and the GPA, and really helping people understand how to do payroll better.
Well, that sounds good, to be honest with you, because there's been so much going on this year and so many changes, but we'll get into that. So those of you that have joined us today, as always, we really like to have the session interactive. So we're going to be having a conversation today, and if you guys want to join in, please add your comments in the comment section. It'd be really good to know where everyone is from today. So I know this is purely the geeky side of me. I love to know where the audience is from, and I know we get a good crowd from the States and Europe, and also in Australia. I think we had somebody on the webinar last week from Melbourne, so that's super late for you guys, so thanks for joining. So shall we just start then? So as I keep saying, there's been a lot going on this year. Rick, do you want to sort of summarize where we're at for the first part of this year for global payroll and HR?
Yeah, what's really interesting is that you've seen kind of a shift and some new players coming into the world as well. You've seen some acquisitions, so there's been some kind of mergers for other organizations. The biggest one that happened actually end of last year into this year was the UKG and Anitas integration or acquisition and integration. But you've seen many organizations come up and pop up, and they've seen, the world is not really going away from remote work, so technology and payroll has to become the future of work behind that. You've seen many different platforms talk about AI and how to leverage AI and making payroll a little bit more simplistic and a little bit more data-driven versus having Excel files. You've also seen a big shift in how to centralize payroll operations and make it a little bit easier, making sure payroll is not just the department that's processing payroll, but really having fundamental conversations with the business and their people strategy and actually how it can be implemented. And so because those are becoming the conversations within payroll, you're starting to see technology have to adapt to those conversations to be able to service the payroll industry as well. So big changes within technology, big changes within strategy have been what I've seen in trending so far in 2024. There's a lot more to come, but I think that the big one is really, how do I understand payroll? How do I simplify that? Because now I have employees in countries that I maybe didn't have before? And then how do I also make sure I understand that what we're doing and how we're doing it, so that I can be a strategic partner to the business and how we actually develop our people strategy and our business strategy, and actually how we're going to operate around the world. So those are some of the big trends that I'm seeing in 2024. But there's many conversations still going on. Another one that came up, and I know we talked about it, was how does payroll no longer be part of HR, but a part of HR, but its own department? That is a conversation that's coming up quite often as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing how technology adapts to that, removing payroll from HR possibly in the future.
Selena, have you got anything further to add?
Yeah, I think outside of the digital transformation that we're seeing, I think there's some interesting conversations around the employee experience as well, right? And we're hearing a lot more about, on-demand pay, pay transparency, and providing some additional flexible payment options. And I think that's gaining a lot of traction as well.
So all good things with technology. Selena, your camera has frozen, so I don't know if you can pop off and then come back on.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try doing that in 1 second.
See, this is the joys of technology, isn't it? So
Can't live with it, can't live without it.
Exactly. So what would you do without Wi-Fi? But it's good to see that we got some people from Seattle, Florida, and we've got a couple of guys from Delhi in India. So thank you for joining us today. So I'm just going to see if I can pop Selena's. I know we'll just carry on with you for a moment, Rick, because I think Selena's just got a few technical issues. Which we all know about, don't we now? Like we all know when things go wrong.
What do you mean technology doesn't work when you're working remotely these days? Oh, come on, that never happens, right?
I know, it's always the way, and it's always like when you really don't want it to go wrong. But we have our person from Australia, so good evening. I know that's super late for you, and also Monica from Poland. So, Rick, what do you think in your eyes has been the most positive thing to happen this year?
Honestly, I think it's just been the kind of drive in technology and automation for payroll. As I mentioned earlier, I remember when global payroll was done through Excel spreadsheets. And now there's been a huge focus on personal data, security, and how to make sure that you simplify that as well. I remember a couple of years ago when we were all talking about GDPR, and everyone was in a frenzy, like, how am I going to actually operate? The fact that now you're even seeing the strength of security, the strength of protecting people's personal data, that has come out really well in technology within the payroll industry. There's some leaders that are out there putting together some really solid systems behind that. Now, there's still room for improvement, right? It's still, if global payroll or global compliance was not an issue, we wouldn't be having this conversation. If it was simple, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But we are very much, what I've seen is that's what I'm most proud of, what I'm seeing in the marketplace. At Helios, we've been actually very much focused on data protection, simplicity, automation. We actually have a rule of 99.9% automation within our processes, so that when data comes into the system and data goes out the system, clients they know it's secure, but they also know that it's the same information, right? There's been so many platforms out there where they've got one system that says one thing, another system says another, and I've seen a lot more unification of that and streamlining that data kind of management in 2024 and 2023, 2024 successfully. So I think that's something I'm very, very proud of and seeing. Also, the flexibility of how you pay people has been a huge talking point around the world as well. I remember when I was in HR and the CEO would walk into my office and say, "Hey, we just hired someone in Japan, figure out how to pay them." And I remember the first time that ever happened, I had to call my payroll provider and say, I can't find the drop down for Japan. And they're like, "Oh, we don't do Japanese payroll." So it was to go from that to be able to say, look, I've got the flexibility in certain platforms to go, look, I can just hire someone right away and do it compliantly is really important and has been probably a very positive move in helping kind of the remote work trend and building that work-life balance and allowing people to work anywhere for anyone through technology. I think has been really powerful.
Well, it's good to have you back, Salinas. We were just saying like all the good stuff about technology, and it always happens when you don't want it to. But is there anything that you could add that you've seen as a positive in the industry this year?
Right. So I think and I think Rick touched on this, but the payroll accuracy, it's both a positive story, but then also like an area of opportunity, right? So I think, looking a year back, the overall mean accuracy was something like 75%. We're from that to like 78%. And I'm super excited just to see like when we're seeing integration of AI, RPA, automating payroll processes, what that is going to do to the numbers. So looking forward to next year, I'm going to be super interested in seeing, are we seeing improvements in data accuracy and payroll accuracy as a result of that.
And Melanie, I'll add to that. So when we talk about AI, I think AI sometimes is overrepresented in payroll, but I think there's some really cool systems that do. I can tell you a little bit of what Helios is doing with AI within payroll. Verifying, I don't know if you've done this before in your past with payroll. I remember having to recheck every line item to make sure everything I put in was actually what came out for payroll, to make sure employees were paid accurately. We are leveraging AI within our tool stack to say it does the work for you. So if you've got 10 active employees, for example, in a particular country, and you've only processed payroll for 9, it'll tell you right off the bat, hey, you're missing an employee here. If you've got if you paid someone a bonus and you didn't pay it last month, it's going to say, hey, this difference here, is this correct? If you fat finger something, like, hey, you've constantly paid this employee about this much, but you've now got them a bonus, and the bonus is $100,000 versus $10,000. Is that something? So our AI tools are actually verifying that. So it's doing a lot of the work that that we've had to do manually. We're really looking to streamline that with AI. I like to say, when I like to use AI, I don't want AI to take over my job. I want AI to do the dishes. I want it to do the laundry. I want it to fold my clothes. That's what I want to do. So when I think about how we leverage AI, it's the work that we don't want to do so that we can be more strategic in payroll, right? And so I'm starting to see not only Helios, but other organizations start to leverage that way so that we can streamline and make sure that payroll is a strategic partner in the business, not just an administrative a data inputter.
And do you know what? I love the saying "fat fingers." So I know I shouldn't admit to this, but I'm going to, because it shows about my fat fingers. But I had to pay an invoice, and it was something like 3,700 GBP, and I ended up paying 37,000 just because I was tired. I had fat fingers, and I pressed confirm. And then I was like, oh my God, what have I just done? Just like that, which is so easy to do. And it was so embarrassing as well, because, I run webinars on LinkedIn about accuracy of data. And I'm like, oh my God. And so that's where AI will hopefully come in.
Well, I think you're right. I think, look, and don't you got to forgive yourself. You're human. We're all human, right? And I think what's behind that is, look, we know that we make mistakes. In business, we're expected to make mistakes. We learn from those mistakes, but we make them. And so it's important that technology, and what we've seen trending is that payroll knows that. We've seen fat finger. We've overpaid people. That's just been the trend everyone's made a mistake in payroll before. So how do we make sure that we provide more of a guarantee or more of an assistance to payroll users or inputters to ensure that whatever they're doing, look, we talk about work-life balance. We also talk about the number of hours. We talk about global organizations. I just wrote an article on that, like how do you build a work-life balance when you don't have work balance yourself? You've got to build technology to help enable that, because you are human. People are going to make those mistakes. And so AI has been a big trend. I don't think AI should be just a HR assistant. I think AI should be more of a tool that organizations can leverage to ensure accuracy, data control, and management of what they're doing within their organizations from a payroll perspective. And that's what we're focused on. And that's what I've seen, even when we speak to the market, that's what the market's looking for. They're looking for things that are going to enable them to be more successful and do the administrative tasks that they don't want to do manually to ensure that their things are being processed accordingly.
Yeah. So do you think, because we were running a study on fraud within payroll, Salinas, do you think AI would help prevent fraud as well?
Yeah, well, I believe so. I think there's different things that I mean, data is really powerful. So I think it really only depends as good as the AI that we're using. And I think Rick kind of touched on this. It's a very, very broad term, but you kind of have to dig deeper into what is it actually doing? What are the mechanisms for learning data? Is it just something that sort of sits on top of Chat GPT? So I would say, yes, it could, but it really depends. It's only as powerful as, you know, what the usability and the utility of it is. So if it's something that's specific and has learned on fraud detection, yes, potentially, but something that's just kind of really broad and standard, that just, you know, is maybe being leveraged for another function, probably perhaps not the best option. So I think it just really depends on the usage.
Yeah, I think you have to have certain checks and balances when you talk about fraud, especially within payroll. You know, one thing that I think has, you know, you've seen spamming emails, you've seen things like, oh, I need to change my bank account coming emails. Organizations need to put policies and procedures in place that says, look, we're not going to take that through email. You know, it has to be done through a system, and there needs to be a verification of that information before we make any of those changes. It only protects the employee and it protects the company as well from that perspective. But education and training is really important when you talk about risk management. We do training on a monthly basis with our teams on spamming, verifications, processes, procedures, documentation on that, because you have to make sure that, you know, that Nigerian prince that wants you to help them pay for something or change their ID, that's something that they're not going to just fall for, right? What's the information that they have to have? What is the information they need to verify? And then what steps they need to put in place? Sometimes going too fast can create mistakes. So you need to have verification checks, and it can be done through AI. It can be done through process and procedures, but it's important that companies put policies and procedures in place. And realistically, we talked about trends for 2024. You're seeing more and more spamming spray emails that come out to organizations, specifically for to payroll organizations, because they're the ones actually managing banking information, etc. So it's really important that organizations put those policies and procedures in place and train their teams on what that looks like to help prevent some of those issues. But yes, AI can support it, but you've got to actually have policies and procedures in place to make sure you can identify those things in the future as well.
And one feature, sorry, that I think when on using your team and using training is the immersive training that you can do. And if you know sort of what your organization could be targeted for, is to actually do where you train your team by sending them the phishing and recognizing, are they reporting it? Are they susceptible to it? So there's just a lot of various and curious ways. So you let the culture of your organization become, I'm always on guard. I'm always on the lookout, and I know how to report it, and that it is okay to report something as soon, you know, if you did click on it, that there is the psychological safety to raise your hand and say, this is what I did, and let's kind of trigger the checklist of, now there's a security check that needs to come into effect. Yeah.
And I think it's amazing. We'll move on from the sort of cybersecurity and security checks. But a few months ago, I received an email from somebody, and I thought, you know, when you sort of recognize somebody, but you don't know. So I was thinking, is it somebody in payroll? And then I realized that this person was pretending to be one of the most senior sort of royalties within the Emirati family. And I was like, what's, you know, and they're like, can you jump on a call? And I'm like, but you're with Prince William tomorrow. I'm sure you're not that person. But if you didn't know, they're like, let's get on to a call. And it's just so really sophisticated now, the amount of potential fraud and the confidence as well. So I thought, how far do I go with this? You know, like once I realised what was going on. But you're right, you do need to have training all the time, don't you? And be aware.
I think that there has to be, when I talk about policies and procedures and leveraging technology to do that, you've got to look at a way that you funnel communication in the business. I think this remote work and how we want to make sure employees have access to us in many ways, if that's through our mobile, if that's through our Teams or Slack, if it's through our Zoom or whatever we're doing, we have to make sure that there's a methodology that's verifiable within how things are changed in payroll. Systems, technology is the way to do that, not receiving emails, text messages, team messages. So I tell our team all the time, I'm never going to send you a text message. if I send you a message, at minimum, it's going to be through Teams. It will not be through a text message. And so if you receive a text message with my name on it, it's not me. And I think that that's quite important to understand, and make sure that you constantly reiterate that. So employees also understand, like, wait, I got a text message from Rick. This doesn't make sense. So this must not be valid. And then they want to validate it, message me on Teams, so that you just want to make sure that is me. And I think that's important. And technology can do that. So, not to kind of Helios all the time, but even like what we've done with our integrations, we've integrated like those messaging like Teams, Slack into our platform, so that if employees do have questions and they want to communicate to our clients on those changes or verifications, they can do that in our platform that's already integrated into their tools, their secure tools, the tools that they have within the organization. And it's really important to have those policies and procedures to ensure that you're having that protection. Again, just getting back to technology and trends, that's really important to build that kind of security, or you have a partner that has that type of security within their systems.
So I want to know from the people that are with us today, what do you think the industry should be doing better? What's your thoughts on what you want to see, or what you're disappointed in, or what you also feel that is going in the right direction? So maybe I shouldn't have it so negative. But yeah, let's hear what your thoughts are on what changes you'd like to see. Selena, is there anything that you think as an industry we should be doing better?
I did touch on this earlier, but for sure, I think the payroll accuracy. We know how important the payroll and the accuracy of that is to employee satisfaction. And I think there's definitely an opportunity to continue to year over year progress with that, and put systems in place where, whether it be it AI or like what we touched on, there's some checks and balances, there's some reconciliation. With the economic changes that sort of we're seeing, or the strain, that maybe offering some more innovative paying solutions, e-wallets, just kind of having an understanding on how you can help your employee through payroll. I think it's something we can kind of lean into further. I wouldn't say we're doing a bad job, but I think there's room for some creative solutions and just advancement on the accuracy side of things.
So what do you think, Rick? What do you think we should do better?
And I really would love to hear from the audience here on what they're thinking here too. But I think the one thing is, we need to start thinking about the employee experience a little bit more. Absolutely, the customer experience, the customers who's actually signed up and paid for the experience. But I would love to figure out a way that we can automate a lot of what the employee experience is, and how employees actually engage into a platform and can ask questions and can get information, right? How do we make sure that we make payroll's job a lot easier? Payroll is a business partner to the business, but there's a lot of times that some of the questions that employees have are very simplistically can be answered through technology and through an experience. And I think to do that will allow, again, getting back to, I'm always about making sure you can push aside the administrative part and be more strategic in payroll. And so I would love to see technology get to that point where it's very much focused on the employee experience, simplifying that experience, making things a little bit easier from the employee's perspective, and make sure employees get confidence or have confidence in what's being produced by the business through that technology, by enabling a much better experience. I think that's really important. And then also, again, AI is something that I think I don't think we've even touched the top of the iceberg here of what AI's capabilities can really be in payroll. And so I would love to see more of that, dive in a little bit deeper to that, get, the trends and analytics. I would love to be able to log into a platform and be able to say, okay, I know how long it's going to take to onboard an employee. I know how long, these are some of the issues that I've seen from an onboarding perspective that cause delays. These are some of the issues and trends that employees tend to have issues with historically, and how to provide data points behind that so that I can improve my overall experience for those employees, and then make my job a lot easier. Those are some things that I would love to see within payroll trends and technology in the future.
So we again was having a conversation within the sort of payroll, wasn't actually with our members, but it's another geeky payroll group. and they were discussing that one of the providers was unable to deal with some of the data for people on leave or maternity leave, etc., and they go back to Excel. You know, like there's this big data of 81% of people still use Excel, and then you've got the provider saying you shouldn't be using Excel, and then you've got the payroll people going, but your system doesn't do this, so we're going to have to go back to Excel. Do you think that's ever going to change? Do you think with the new providers like yourself, or the existing providers, they have to step up, and will AI do that, or is it a new software to be written altogether?
Yeah, I think, look, Excel has its advantages and disadvantages, right? I think that I want to put that out there, but I think that payroll has to get to the point where if someone, again, we talk about simplification, we talk about automation. If I'm again, in hiring people in countries that I've never done business in, right? So if I'm a payroll user, I need to trust that my payroll provider, if I hire somebody in Spain, for example, I need to make sure that they have the accruals based on my CBA, my collective bargaining agreement. I need to make sure that they understand what termination payroll is going to look like, what a finito is. I want to make sure that they understand that, because I don't know how to do that, right? So because I'm the user and I'm new to this country, I've got to rely that they know what they're doing, and I need to be able to get it in real time. There are a lot of providers out there that have local providers that they actually work with. So, and then that's not as much of an automated process, but they've got to think about, and AI can do a lot of this. They've got to look at what's the rule, and build a rule base behind that, and then say, okay, this is the rule. So when I'm a user, my user goes in, it can do the calculations and verification. The one thing that I think most payroll individuals don't like is when they input data points, they have an estimate of what they think their payroll costs are going to be. They present that to the business, then they send it over to their payroll provider. That comes back, and they go, oh, nope, there's a wrong calculation, and that cost is significantly higher because someone didn't understand it. And that doesn't make the payroll individual look good, doesn't make the business look good, and it creates some friction because now you're questioning it, right? Why wasn't it there the first time? Why are you telling me after the fact? So I think payroll needs to be more proactive in how it's actually doing its calculations and how it's supporting businesses, so that when businesses input information into a payroll system, they know that it's accurate, right? There's a verification process behind it. There needs to be there's some checks behind it, but as accurate as possible to validate, hey, this is actually what I'm doing. This is my cost, and this is what I'm projecting. I'm just making sure that you're validating to make sure all the tax calculations are there, and et cetera. But there needs to be more of a proactive approach in payroll versus having payroll individuals just put data points in. The payroll individuals or users need to be able to have data points that they know that are going to be accurate, and then when they look at their cash requirements for payroll processing.
So, Salinas, do you think people are going to move away from Excel at some point?
I'm sure that they would be thrilled to, right? And I think it comes down to the innovation in the payroll industry. But it's interesting because that's actually, I think, one of the biggest challenges when you look at what is driving companies to look for new payroll solutions. It's definitely data integrity is a piece, but then the system integrations, right? Because having the right capabilities, but if you don't have the right capabilities, and maybe that's not an area that your software has, is then do you have the ability to integrate very well with other systems that can then manage that function for me, right? So I think, there's a lot of interest in minimizing the complexity, minimizing, because when we're going back to Excel, not only does that introduce a manual process, the potential of a fat finger, but that it produces overhead for the payroll organization to manage that. So I think it's an opportunity for, for example, the payroll solutions, Helios, obviously it has been mentioned, but I think that's a key opportunity so that, the payroll professionals don't have to manage the data in the different systems. That's going to take away the ability, let's say if they were to implement AI, to have the means to have the right data to make the right decisions for the organization.
Thank you, Selena. So we've got a discussion point here. In the event that a local payroll provider is compromised by a cyber attack, what contingency plans or security measures should organisations have in place to safeguard sensitive payroll data and ensure minimal disruption to payroll processing and employee payments? Rick, do you want to take this one?
It's a great question. And I think really the foundational part of your platform is there's a couple things. Like you need to make sure you have encryption keys. You need to make sure you're ways that you can protect your data from that perspective. Backups are very important. How often are you backing up data? A lot of the cyber attacks that you've seen out there have been ransom attacks. So they're saying, look, we're not going to give you access to your system, or we're not going to allow you to access this data that you have until you pay us a certain amount of money. So that happened with a payroll provider recently, not going to name their name, that came out recently with them. And so it's really important to make sure you have backups where you're storing your information from a server perspective, making sure you're encrypted. You got to make sure that you have pen testing. Pen testing, I think, is the most important thing. I think it's understated, but doing as many pen tests and as frequently as possible, and doing it when your team doesn't know it, I think is really important as well. From a payroll provider perspective. Also, a lot of the cyber attacks actually come in through emails, or they come in through sometimes your local payroll provider integrations. And so you need to make sure that you're validating your integrations that you have. If it's any type of business app, or if it's an integration with a local payroll provider, you need to validate that they are secure as well. Just integrating with anybody is not the best way. The files that you get from them, you need to validate that. They need to go through a virus scan check. There's certain process and procedures you need to do that. But if it happens, look, people are going to attack payroll organizations because that's where there's a lot of personal data, specifically banking information. It's making sure that your provider has the right securities processes and procedures in place. Certifications are really important to validate with your local providers as well. Are they ISO certified? Are they SOC 2, SOC 2 or SOC 1 Type 2 certified? Those are things that you need to validate multiple times, and then also see what else are they doing to ensure the security is protected. But when it happens, what are they going to do to make sure that your data is secure and that they can get access to your data and to resolve the issue as soon as possible? Some of that's also some of the insurances they have in place to mitigate some of those costs and claims for you.
And I think some of the issues that we've come across when people have been hacked, like some of our members, they don't know what to do because the communication isn't coming from the provider, because obviously they're dealing with everything else, and they're unsure of what the communication should be to their employees, what they should actually be doing. So there's it's a huge journey, isn't it, Selena's, when that does actually happen.
And I think Rick mentioned this, and you just did as well. I think it's treating it not as like an if, but treating it as a when, and starting a proactive approach right now on what are the standard operating procedures, what are the things that are going to be done. So from a proactive standpoint, for when it happens, and the prevention, and hopefully being able to still manage your payroll operations. But then beyond that, the communication to employees, who else may be affected. And I think having that strategy in place sooner rather than later, and not having to do it when it happens, it is going to help kind of manage the stress of that and kind of resolving it a lot quicker.
Yeah, I think when you go through your vendor kind of process and choosing your vendor, a really good question to ask for the RFP process is, what happened? What do we do? How do we partner together if you're hacked? What are those steps? A lot of companies don't ask that question. I think it's a bad question, right? We don't want to think about someone getting hacked, but as we just indicated, it's not if, it's when. It's inevitable. There's a lot of protections behind that, but it's also to make sure like there's a plan. Like you don't get insurance because you don't think you're getting an accident. You get insurance to make sure you have coverage if you do get into an accident. And so you should ask those questions when you're validating your RFP process, or when you're looking to select a vendor, and have that properly documented. Having someone on your risk and compliance team as well as part of the conversation with your vendor selection is going to be important, because if they could get that information from your vendor, then they can also come up with a plan how to act. If something happens, they can take action that fast within your business as well, because it's already been communicated with that vendor of what those next steps are, versus trying to figure out retroactively or reactively, try to be proactive here and your overall approach, and communicate what those processes could be.
I think maybe what I'm going to do next time is run an anonymous survey and ask the question, what does everyone think the industry should be doing better? Because our audience is very quiet today. So, but it would be quite cool to know what people think. So AI, we talk about AI a lot. We talk about cybersecurity a lot. What do you think is going to be the next big thing in global payroll? Is it going to be the complication of cross-border payments, or the digital nomad? What do you think is going to be the next thing that we need to keep an eye open on?
The biggest trend right now is still remote work. I think we're not going to get away from that anytime soon. Employees have realized that I can work and still have my family, and that's really important. Family's more important than any job out there. So I think it's really important that organizations kind of look at, okay, now I have the opportunity to support my teams. I have the opportunity to hire the best talent around the world. I'm not restricted by borders or time zones or postal codes. I can hire the best in the world, which is really powerful. It's a very powerful statement and really helps businesses. And there's a lot of data out there that shows that remote work is very positive for organizations. But because of that, there has to be a way to simplify that process as much as possible. And that flexibility in employment, some of it is the traditional setting up entities and actually onboarding employees. Some of it's the EOR model, the employer of record model that's out there as well. Some of it's also leveraging contractors, but you want to make sure that you understand the rules and regulations behind that so that you don't have any misclassification issues. And there's technology out there that can support you in understanding that as well. But that flexibility is what organizations are looking at. So you talked about nomad visas. Right now, I remember the day where if you wanted to work in another country and you either had to be married to someone in that country, you had to get a visa in that country that had to be sponsored, or you had to have had some type of connection in that particular country. That sponsorship is no longer a requirement completely, because now a lot of countries are now doing nomad visas. And so with nomad visas, what does that mean? I have to pay taxes in those places. I no longer need my employer to do that. But if my employer is not registered in a given country, how do I do it? So it's because of that flexibility, because employees no longer need that connection to the employer in regards to their visa processes where they want to live. They now have to figure out, employers have to say, look, if I really want to retain this talent, or if I want to hire this talent in a particular market, what options do I have? And that flexibility within payroll is quite important. And look, registering an entity for one employee may not make sense. The employer of record model may make more sense. A contractor solution may make sense because it may be on a temporary basis. But I think that flexibility employers need and employees need is here, and it's one of the biggest trends for 2024. And all the indications already say 2025, it's going to grow at least by 25%, and 2026 is going to grow another 25 to 30% from there. And you also have to remember the generation that's now getting into the workforce now. The last 3-4 years, all they've known is remote work. So they're not used to going to offices. So trying to get employees into offices going forward is not going to happen. So payroll has to be able to, payroll and payroll technology has to be able to look at process, procedures, and management, and how they're going to be able to support the new workforce that's coming into the market in the coming years as well.
And do you think hybrid working that's it now? That's here to stay?
Yeah, I think so. Look, I'm a traditional. I used to love going to the office. I love that, but at the same time, I have an office. I'm in my office twice a week, and that's me forcing myself to go to the office because it's more convenient. It's easier for me to work from home. I'm right now in my office at home, and so the fact is that's the world we live in, and so technology, payroll has to be able to adopt, and that's why we keep calling it the future of work. I would say it's the now of work, right? This is how we are. This is where we're going, and it's just going to get further along. And again, everyone that's coming into the workforce today, that's what they're used to. They're not going to want to go back.
Yeah, and Selena, do you wish that you was in the office full time, or do you prefer the hybrid?
I've always done remote, so I definitely lean towards that way. When I did go into the office right out of college, I will say that was the most fantastic experience of my life. Had a lot of fun, but I think there was like a time and a place for it, and really remote work has given me a lot of opportunity, I think, to for a while be a single mom. So personally, to me, it was extremely advantageous being able to have that flexibility. So I do prefer it. I think it's important though to set a culture where, you know, you do feel like you can connect with people and you're not by yourself. And it's interesting because I think I'm probably one of the only, I think I'm by myself here in Florida. It never feels like I'm by myself. So I think it's a lot on leaning in on the company culture and still feel like, hey, you could walk into somebody's office. It's just done in a different way, and you can still have the same knowledge and the same sort of water cooler conversations. I think you have to have the right culture for it. So I personally love remote work. Rick, please, don't feel free not to change that in the near future.
Right. That was a bit of an unfair question. Selena's got
but I think also when you think of it from a business perspective as well, look, as a business owner, as much money as you pay in rent, I mean, in another one of my investments, we were paying over $50,000 a month in rent for office space. That $50,000 can be reinvested when people are not using office space, right? And we had multiple offices. So imagine those dollars that you come back and reinvesting into the organization, reinvesting back into your people and your overall people strategy. You know, that's where your salary increases come in, and that's where your bonuses come in. So businesses are starting to see, not only is it's not just getting everyone in, because there's ways to connect people from that perspective, but it's also so that I can also reinvest and grow the business. It's not just about the profits. It's about how do I make sure I can support my organization and my people strategy and technology strategies to support the overall business. And I think, again, the trend that's been in the market has been technologies, really supported and changed businesses, transform businesses in many, many ways. And that's because businesses have more money to allocate into those things because, again, remote work.
If I can add to that, it's also extremely advantageous when you think if you have a distributed team, if something were to happen where, there's a weather event, right? Melanie, I think you're going through a little bit of that right now, but if there's a weather event that happens, that doesn't negatively impact the business operations because you have members of the team that are able to keep the business going. You're still able to service your customers. So there's a huge component of that is a positive that, even if something were to happen outside of the remote workplace, you still have the capability to log in and work and get things done and manage despite some of the different things that may be going on that would maybe normally affect someone's ability to go into the office and work. So I think it's super advantageous from that perspective as well. Business should still, we still be able to keep running, and then you can service customers in different regions. That's not something that you would have to kind of really necessarily adapt if you have folks that are distributed in different places.
Yeah, I really do have to agree with you there. So we've got a message from Charmaine. Gallup just released their State of the Global Workplace 2024 in the live webinar a few minutes ago, stated that technology is not where it needs to be yet to replace human relationships in the office. You still do need the relationships. But I think sometimes having a break from working with somebody 5 days a week makes those relationships stronger when you do see them, isn't it? Being slightly absent, and then when you do see them, it's a lot better. But I just want to go on to data. Selena, so we've talked a lot about data, but what do you think companies can learn from the global payroll data that they hold?
Ooh, I love data. So I really like this question, and I think it's data is really powerful. Data is really powerful. You can, and I could probably go on for 30 minutes, but it gives you the capability to to track certain things. You can look at, we're talking about, remote hybrid, but if you're interested in tracking employee attendance, you can look at that. Overtime patterns for employees. What are the compensation trends? All of these things are super helpful in making business decisions. And we are seeing that there is payroll is taking more of the payroll department is taking more of a role in a lot of the organizational decisions that companies are making, whether it be cost management, growth, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is definitely a big topic when we talk about, pay transparency. And then payroll data can also pinpoint, inefficiencies. It can help you manage labor costs. There's just so many benefits in doing that. And I think we're even seeing that that being leaned on by some companies, and you do see that they're hiring data analysts to join the departments to really take a look at the data and make use of those skill sets to proactive decisions to learn on the data. So I think, again, we're just kind of really scratching the surface there, but the advance in the technology, I think, is going to take us a long way.
Yeah, I think and I'm actually going to also respond to Charmaine's, because this kind of ties together. As you kind of think about where the world is trending, and how we outside of work are also communicating, we're very much a social media kind of world and how we're living in that. And I think it's really interesting how data can be utilized even from that. So we talked about relationships and that relationship within the human factor. If you look at it from a generational perspective, those who've been in the office most of their career, they feel like the relationships aren't as strong today, post-COVID. You look at kind of the ones that have been in the office but now working from home, they feel like it's there, but I'm not maybe as engaged as I used to be before. And then you look at those who are coming into the workforce, and they're very much social media kind of generation. They think that, hey, I'm really engaged. Like, I'm here, I'm doing everything it is. I'm here for my 9 to 5, and I'm out after that, but I'm connected. So it's really perspective, and fortunately and unfortunately, technology is looking at what some of the trends are for what's coming into the new workforce from the new workforce individuals. And so when you look at technology, there are things like a Work Vivo. They've tried to put things in a perspective where you can feel like it's social media, but you're still connected to your teams. You've seen Zoom, did very well during COVID because it was ways that people were connected that way. And so people were saying, look, I can still have my life. I can still, but still be connected to the business when I need to be, but it's not as important. Now, using data and trends from that, it's really important in looking at utilization rates and how people are leveraging technology behind that. So when I do what I call I can't think of the word now. It's a heat test how people leverage platforms. And I see that it's very generational within our beta testers, how people leverage technology and how they're engaging with others within their organizations based on what's out there. So leveraging like WorkVivo, leveraging payroll data, and taking that and how they actually interact with the business. So I think it's a lot of it's trends. It's based on generational uses and what people are used to and how they've actually operated for years. And then it's also how people need to evolve from that. But it's all based on where we're headed. And that's where technology is building. It's not there yet. I agree with Charmaine. It's not quite there to get rid of human relations. I don't think we ever want to get rid of human relations. And so if there's any technology that does that, I would be very concerned. But our goal here is how do we build connectivity to the business, how do we build connectivity to each other and build partnerships and within our teams. I think that's where technology is trying to hit. It's not there yet, but I think that's where it's headed.
And technology can't replace culture. It can be a tool. So I think it's still also an essential part of making sure that employees do feel engaged and do feel like they belong and a lot of that for each department as a business. So I think that's an important factor as well.
So things have really, really changed, haven't they, over the last 10 years? I remember one of our first ever summits we had, somebody was a bit angry that we talked about having data in the cloud because they didn't ever see that as happening. And now that's just normal. There's regulations, there's AI, we've had an RPA about 6-7 years ago. We've got people working from home. So it's continuously changing. But the biggest thing also that's continuously changing are regulations and compliance. And so we're coming towards the end of this LinkedIn Live. And I know compliance is one of those things that keeps people awake at night. And I feel like it's going to get worse. Governments need money. And obviously, with the different ways that people are working as well, how do people keep on top of it all? And obviously with Selena's love for data, like how do we keep on top of it? Is it literally just down to the provider you have, or is there any other tips that you guys can give?
There's definitely, I think you're going to have to utilize different ways. I don't know that there's going to be, it'd be fantastic if there's one sole way that you could get access to all the compliance information and everything that you would need to implement it. But I just don't know that that's really possible today. So yeah, I think the global payroll provider, plays a role in this. Like if you have a payroll provider that does offer some sort of insights, you do maybe get some updates on regulations. That's very helpful. But I think we talked a little bit about people and connecting. And so I think beyond having access to newsletters and publications, which I think is also helpful, like having a community, your payroll peers. And I think forums like this kind of help connect people together. And I think people and the communication is a powerful way to also kind of stay in the know and on, what updates are coming down. I think there's also a sense of a proactive approach in some cases, and just kind of maybe understanding if there's some regulations that are going to come in, because there does seem to be a tie. Economic changes and when things maybe aren't as well usually lead to some payroll regulations. So I think kind of just understanding, your employee base and where you're at in your locations and how the economic situation is there could probably, kind of give you an inkling as to whether there are going to be some regulations further down the line to, attack some of the issues that may be happening.
Yeah, I think adding to that as well is I want to be very clear. Governments don't change laws overnight.
No.
Right? So I think sometimes we get so worried about the law is going to change tomorrow and I need to know that I'm fully compliant. Laws change and there's notices to those laws so that it gives opportunity for businesses to be able to enact them. Now, being proactive is a different conversation, right? But making sure you understand those rules and regulations, a great provider will be able to do that for you. Because if you're not the only customer they have, and it's going to be very important for them to make sure they stay above board as well, because they are ultimately responsible for how things are calculated. You are responsible for providing information from the employee in your business. They are responsible from a payroll calculation perspective and the tax filing. And so if they are not keeping you up to date, you should also recommend and review your contracts that there's some liability that they take on behind that. But a good provider is going to make sure that you're up to date as much as possible, and also have open communication with you behind that. And that may be notifications, that may be newsletters, that may be your check-ins with your account manager that you have with them. But a good provider is going to be very proactive with you because they have some liability tied to the contract of what's to be done and what's not to be done. And also, I think sometimes we have to be very conscious on what those trends are, right? And make sure we ask the right questions. And making sure, remember, employees really understand what their benefits are. They understand, a lot of employees unfortunately live paycheck to paycheck. And so if it's $1, pound, euro off, they're going to know and they're going to ask the question. So giving an opportunity for open communication internally and making sure that your provider can have open communication and SLAs that they have to respond back to you, I think is really important, and that relationship from compliance. But compliance is, it is a partnership with any provider that you work with. It is not solely based on you, it's based on them as well. And it's really important that while you build that relationship, if it's selecting a new provider or making sure you're holding your current provider accountable, it is really important that you have those conversations. And when you should be having check-ins, if it's monthly or quarterly, with your account manager or whoever your POC is at the organization, you should start asking those questions. Like, what do I need to, what's coming up? What do I need to know? What are there any trends or anything that's going to happen in 2024, 2025? How do I proactively think about this? Or even have conversations about your people strategy. Hey, we're going to add 15 more people to this country. How's this going to impact our costs? Are there going to be things that I need to be aware of, like pensions, that I need to be aware of that are going to come up? Start having those open conversations. Some of the biggest issues, I know that we're close to time here, some of the biggest issues that you find is that it's not the local provider, it's the communication that they're told last minute on some of your things and strategies. So have open conversations with them, pick their brain and ask them to help you kind of talk through that your people strategy and what you're doing, so that they can make sure they're proactively supporting you from a compliance perspective as well.
Okay, so we're coming to the end. Is there anything that you think, any words of wisdom that you would like to leave today's LinkedIn Live with? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot now.
Selena, so you want to go first?
She's like, no.
I think really personally for me, I think payroll is an exciting place to be, and I think if you're open-minded on some of the changes and the things that are coming, it's going to be incredible. I agree with Rick. We're just barely scratching the surface, and I think payroll is going to be a very, very powerful department. It's going to continue to be very powerful for businesses and organizations and decision making. I think kind of leaning into that. I don't know. It's a very exciting. There's a lot of opportunity, not just in terms of technology, but how payroll can help even further on the employee experience.
Yeah, I'm going to say this. I wrote an article on this earlier this week called Payroll, Unsung Hero. Payroll is the unsung hero for the people department. And I think it's important that you understand what that means. That means that people may not always see what you do, but you are the glue that holds the business together. And that means you have a very powerful voice and you have a lot of data points that can really help drive and secure the business for success. And so as you are thinking about the trends for 2024, think about everything that we talked about: compliance, data, technology, and what's remote work and what that means for your business. Bring those conversations up with your leadership team. Make sure your voice is heard. That doesn't mean they're going to go with all your ideas, but what that means is that at least you're part of the conversation. And I think that's really important because payroll is evolving. It will continue to evolve to support where the business is going. And again, the business can't operate without it. So my words of wisdom is just make sure you have your voice. My grandmother used to say, a closed mouth never gets fed. And I believe everyone on this webinar is hungry. So it's really important that you vocalize that, you have questions, and make sure your voice is always heard.
Well, thank you very much. I do think grandmothers do give a good bit of advice. Mine always said, if you don't ask, you don't get. So, just got to ask, got to get out there. Thank you so much, Selena. It's really nice to have you on your first LinkedIn Live. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience. It's been great. Rick, we're meeting up again in a month's time. If anybody wants to get in touch with Salinas or Rick, are you happy via LinkedIn?
Yep. Please feel free to reach out anytime. I love answering questions. Those who've been on these webinars before, LinkedIn Lives with me, if you reach out to me and ask questions, I always try to get back to you guys on those questions and really support. My Achilles heel is to help people. And so I love to help people. So if it's a simple question or just a quick conversation, feel free to reach out and go from there. And then I see the question really quickly, Charmaine. I can walk you through that. If you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, happy to schedule a call with you, kind of walk through some of those reports, given that we're getting ready to jump off. But feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and let's connect. And I'm happy to kind of walk through that with you as well.
So, Charmaine, make sure you do, because I know Rick definitely does get back to people. So I wasn't ignoring you. I was going to contact you offline, but thank you so much. And if anybody is watching this post live event, make sure you put your comments in or contact Salinas or Rick directly on LinkedIn and they'll get back to you. So thanks once again, and I'll see you all soon.
Thank you all.